Hey deer hunters, welcome back to another episode of Bow Hunt or Die. Justin and I were just talking the other day about, you see everyone doing these monster tractors. I think Justin was actually commenting on me, making fun of me.
Yeah, everyone. I think everyone is you.
Everyone. Okay, it's gosh. Every time we got to go down this path, guys. But Justin and I were having a legitimate conversations about if you're one of those guys who are just getting into bow hunting, or you have a piece of property where you can't do food plots, you can't manipulate the land, you can't do those kind of things, can you still be successful? Can you still harvest a deer? And of course the answer is yes. That's what we're here to talk about today, giving you some tips and some secrets to be able to get out there now so you're better prepared for the fall.
Interestingly enough, Todd, most of these things that we're going to talk about aren't really secrets. They're just things that sometimes people don't think about, especially now that we're into June. It's hot. Bugs are out, people are kind of like, there's just a lot of stuff outside that I don't want to be doing right now. But the reality is the amount of work that you put in today, and whether that work is inside your house at a computer, using Hunt Stand, at an app, or actually out in the woods doing stuff, like all of that work adds up towards this goal of being successful in the fall. So if we rewind the clock back and we come out of the hunting season, right? We go into shed hunting, a lot of that postseason scouting where you're beginning to formulate that groundwork for next year. Then we go into turkey hunting season. We kind of get distracted for a couple of months chasing these birds around. Next thing you know, turkey season's over and it's green outside and it's starting to get warm. And I know one of the things that you talked about was food plots. And when you look at food plots, there's two different styles, if you want to consider food plots, right? You got more of your spring plantings and then your late summer and fall plantings. For me personally, I've always been a late summer and fall type of guy, so an annual type of food plot. That's primarily what I plant. So I'm not usually doing a lot of food plot work early in the year. If I am doing food plot work right now, it's usually mowing and maybe doing some spraying to begin ground clearing so that when it's time to disc and plant for the fall, my food plots are ready to go. So I like to do that work now. I mean, what about you? What are you doing food plot wise?
Well, and let's just talk about that food plot thing. Like, you may be lucky enough to have a piece of property where the farmer already has beans going in or corn going in, and maybe you don't have to do anything at all. Maybe you just need to coordinate a little bit of effort with him or her, whoever's planting your plots, to be able to just buy some of that back or keep some of it, or just hunt it as it is.
That's literally the greatest. Like, if you can buy some crop back from the farmer that's farming your property, like, in my opinion, that's like almost better than most of the food plots that we plant. Like, there's less work that you have to do. Obviously, it costs money, right? It is certainly not cheap if you want to buy food back. But like, if you think about the amount of money you spend on seed and fertilizer and travel and tractors and ATVs and discs and everything, it adds up after a while. So yeah, buying some corn or some beans preferably. And like in my case, I love being able to buy beans back for that late season hunting. That's my favorite preferred thing to do. So, like Todd said, if you don't have the equipment, you don't have the time, but you happen to have the resources that allow you to buy back some crop from the farmer, like, that works just as well, if not better, than a food plot.
But I want to make sure we don't mix this video up, Justin. We want to be really clear here. I've talked to two people here in the last couple of weeks when they're just like, Todd, I just don't have the ability to do food plots. So, I really want you and I to talk about beyond the food plot, right? Because I think we've really, as hunters, gosh, you just watch so many videos nowadays, and it just, sometimes I feel like,
it's a crutch,
including myself,
for some people.
It's just like all it is food plots, food plot, food plot. And you know what? I just think back in the days of my swamp in Wisconsin, there was no food. There is no food out there.
Well, there's food.
There's food.
It's just not row crops.
The way you think of it. And there are absolutely things that you could be doing now in June. So let's really focus on that.
Let me say that I have never killed a buck in a food plot. My entire life. Never killed one in a food plot.
Come on, not one.
I've killed maybe...
Czar.
I haven't.
No.
3 or 4 does in food plots in my life.
You wounded one in a food plot once.
I did.
You did.
That was late season. It
that.
wasn't really a food plot. That was food that I bought back from the farmer.
Okay.
That was beans.
Let's stay focused.
But I've never
here.
killed a buck in a food plot. My point is that what you were saying, a lot of people feel like you need food plots to kill deer. And you absolutely do not. There's so many other things.
So let's start right there. So right now, Justin, if it's June, you just met somebody, you're in a local pro shop, you're standing around Lancaster Archery, whatever, somebody hits you up and they say, man, Justin, you know what? right now, like what should I be doing right now? What kind of things can I do? I can't do food plots. Tell me what to do. What should I be out there doing? What's the first thing you're gonna tell them right now?
First thing I'm gonna do right now is get the lay of the land and know where the food is, right? So, and that's going to include your row crops as well as your natural, mass producing trees. So your acorns and your apple trees and things like that that the deer are gonna feed on, because at the end of the day, food is very important. Whether you plant it or not, food is still very important. Deer have to eat to live, and it controls so much of what they do. So I'm gonna go to my spot, I'm gonna figure out what food is there, because it changes from year to year. But on top of that, I'm not just gonna look at my farm, I'm gonna look at everything in the surrounding area, because
good point.
So often we get like hyper focused in on like what our field has to offer, and we don't pay attention to what the neighbor's field. And it might be a mile away, but a mile for a deer is nothing to go for a destination food source. So if I know where the destination food is, it will begin to allow me to try to figure out what the movement patterns of those deer are going to be come fall.
And let me just stop you there for a second, Justin, because just because you go to your property today and there's no deer on it, doesn't mean the deer aren't eventually gonna end up on that piece of property. I mean, and that's something you gotta think about. Just because right now, like Justin said, the beans might be a mile away, 3/4 mile, but maybe you've got the bedding. Maybe you've got the couple of killer white oaks that are producing big time. They're gonna end up there at some point.
Sure.
Period. And then of course you got your good old rut spots, right? You've got those spots that just seem like aren't really hot until the rut hits, and all of a sudden you happen to have the fence line that connects two big pieces of woods together. You may look at a piece of property like, gosh, there's just nothing here, but you may have that fence line.
I think the most important thing is to get that macro overview of your area, what it looks like for that year, and really, it's kind of like doing a puzzle, right? When I'm doing a puzzle with my kids, like I have to flip all the pieces over so I can look at them before I can begin to try to make a plan of how I'm going to attack this thing.
You start with the edges first.
Of course, everybody does. I mean, is there another way to do a puzzle? Start with the corners and do the edges, right? But when it comes to deer hunting, it's the exact same thing, right? So I'm going to get an overview of what the situation looks like. Some fields, some years, might not be planted at all. Or maybe they were put into winter wheat last year and now they're going to be cut in July or August and they're not going to be planted again this fall. So I'm going to have to start making plans and decisions based on that. From there, I'm going to start using, if I am lucky enough to have this, past years of data from either hunting sightings or trail camera data to start honing in on the areas that I want to be. I'm also going to use maps. Aerial maps and hunt stands.
So I'm gonna interrupt here real quick. So let's think about this. I mean, we talk about intrusion, and we all know, guys, there's only so many times you can step into a buck's bedroom or any deer's bedroom until they just say, okay, this is too much pressure. I'm not coming back here for a while.
Do you really think that's the case?
I
think
do.
A lot of people disagree with that.
I know there are a lot of people, but I think if you overdo it, it can hurt you in the long run. So let's just say the point I'm trying to get across here is if you're gonna go into your property and you're gonna start snooping around and you're gonna find these mass crop trees, be effective. Don't try to make more. I mean, don't put yourself in a position where you got to make 10 more trips. I mean, bring your trail cameras with you. Have your app ready to go so you can mark those mass trees. I mean, you can absolutely tell if an apple tree right now is going to have apples on it or not. You absolutely can pay attention to your oaks and you can see which ones are going to have it or not. We're in a drought. Find out where the deepest water hole on the property is if you have one, whether it's a stream, whether you just got a mud hole that held water. Maybe it's a grassy area that naturally has just always a wet area that holds water. I mean, those deer do seek out and find those areas. Make your trip into that property as effective as you can and be taking notes of everything. The reality is you got to find where the deer want to be and where they eventually want to be. Sure. And then, of course, with that, I think you need to think about ways to kill deer is if they are going to move through your property, right? They're not just coming in everywhere all the time. There are certain areas where they just naturally want to come through your property, and you got to figure out those spots.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, yeah, and I use
your saddles. Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, topography is a huge thing for figuring out deer movement, right? So using a tool like HuntStand where I can do the overlay, I can see the aerial photos of what the forest and what the fields look like, and then I can overlay a topo on top of that and try to start narrowing down those areas. And that's more probably for areas that maybe we haven't hunted in the past. If you're gonna go, hunt a new state, or you're going to try some public land, or you got a new lease or something along those lines, like that high level electronic scouting, like for me, is always the basis. And then I'll start to hone in. Like from there, what I'm going to do, and guys, it's hot out, right? It's the summertime. I do not want to be walking all over God's green earth when it's 90 degrees out if I can avoid it. So what I'm going to do is identify the areas that are of most importance to me, that I want to confirm something that I've seen. Right. If I want to confirm something I've seen on a topographic map, I'm going to make notes and drop pins that I want to check out these 4 spots on this farm. I'm not just wandering aimlessly.
So just to be super clear, you're sitting down at your desk first. You're doing desk work first. You're pulling up the maps.
100% of the time.
Then you're going in.
Absolutely every single time on every new piece of property. And sometimes it takes, or is a benefit to do that on a piece of property you've been on for a long time, just to sit down and kind of wipe the slate clean and just take a look at it with a fresh set of eyes. I think a lot of us get comfortable with hunting a piece of property, and we've had a stand in a certain area for a long period of time. Maybe it's not producing anymore. Like, now is the time when you want to really take a hard look at what you've been doing and figure out if you want to change something before the fall comes, because now is the time to do that.
I agree. Okay. So we covered some good grounds here. Now, I think the manipulation of land can always be good too. I mean, listen, if you can't do food plots and you have the ability to do some work on your property, you definitely can do some manipulation. Now, timing of this is critical, and I don't necessarily suggest that you just go grab your chainsaw and your chaps and you get after it. But you can, with creating bedding areas, hinge cutting, manipulating, maybe an area where they just kind of get pinched through. I mean, I have done that. It has worked for me. It was very successful for me last year on one farm that I hunt. But I think the manipulation of land, or using the topology of land, which we've already talked about, can be just huge. A fence, good crossings, finding those obvious things. I mean, those are just great signs of telling you what's going on.
I mean, I'll give you an example of something that I've done in the past that helped me, right? I had an area that the deer were pinching.
Oh, is that when you fenced them in?
Well, yeah. I had an area that the deer were coming through, maybe a 60-yard swath, like of woods, kind of, right? A bit of a funnel. But the problem was, like, I never could seem to guess right on the kind of which side of that 60 yards they wanted to be. I'd have to obviously play the wind, depending on, how it was a morning, afternoon, or whatever. So I went in one year, I was cutting a bunch of buckthorn trees down, and I just dropped a couple trees down over like 20 yards of either end, right? There were trees I was probably gonna cut down anyways because they were buckthorn and they were junk, but I cut them down and I purposely dragged them or dropped them in an area where it took that 60 yards and pinched it into like a 30 yards where I could set up on one end of it and I could shoot the whole thing. And now, unless the deer wanted to navigate its way through these trees that I just cut down, like, it just pinched them into a little bit of a smaller, tighter area where I was able to, harvest a couple deer in there, right? So, I mean, and it didn't take a whole lot of work, but what it took was a little bit of thought of how can I conquer this challenge kind of that I have in front of me. And I think it was an easy thing. It didn't take me more than probably 30 minutes to go in and do what I needed to do, and it made the world of difference.
So with that too, I think another thing you need to add is routes and access points. I mean, man, being a successful deer killer, as Justin always liked to refer to it, is knowing how to get in and get out. That makes a huge difference, and that is something that you absolutely can start now. If you know where you're going to hunt, and you've done your homework, you sat in front of your computer, you've gone out and you've investigated little spots, you see old trails, maybe they're being used right now, maybe they're not, but you know that they're there. Knowing how you're gonna get in and get out of those spots is huge. And taking the time to create those paths, cutting them, clearing them off. I'm not suggesting, I've been pretty crazy before and blown the leaves off and everything as it's gotten later in the fall to be able to tiptoe into some of those spots. But having those good, what do you?
I've heard of other people. I've never done that.
You know what? He's always, come on, man. I mean, you've never done that? Really? Okay, well, it does work.
Didn't we talk about you didn't want to intrude on your areas, but you're going there with a blower and blow it all around?
You know what? That kind of stuff deer get used to. I'm talking about just human scent just stinking up a spot completely. They're used to noise from tractors and so forth. But the point is, having good routes in and good routes out is awesome. I'm sorry, but if you know what the wind's going to be and you know how you're going to hunt that stand, that is that is money. Even if it means taking the long way in, you know, or figuring out a path to get on the long way out, that is money. Yeah. So and don't wait to do that.
There's two things I do there is I'll number one, I'll lay a track down in hunt stand, right? And I like doing that versus the old, you know, bright eyes, you know, for going in the morning. The problem is you walk into any woods in the Midwest and there's so many bright eyes everywhere from years gone by. I don't know where I'm going, right? So I've kind of gotten away from doing that, and I'm dropping a track using hunt stand. So I can use, if I do need a little bit of assistance to get to these locations, I've got that track that I can follow. And it's amazing how precise those tracks are, those GPS tracks on those apps are. So I'm gonna do that. But I'm also, you know, again, this is private land that I have permission to do this stuff on, but my personal favorite thing is take a machete and I go in and just chop myself a trail, right, to where I'm going, because I absolutely hate having to fight my way through brush, or then my arrows are getting popped out of my quiver. I'm getting hung up on stuff in the dark. I'm making a bunch of extra noise. Like, just take the time, go in, make yourself a little bit of an extra trail. And then the one thing that I do love is the reflective lifelines from HSS, from Hunter Safety System. Reflective lifelines are the greatest thing ever made, unless you're worried about your stands getting stolen, right? You don't want to necessarily put them right next to a road per se, but if it's somewhere back in the woods, dude, you hit that thing with a light from 150 yards away and it lights up, and now I know exactly where I'm going. So like, that's kind of like my replacement for the bright eyes. I agree. Has been the reflective lifelines. Okay. Speaking of which, that's the other thing that I think people should be doing during the summertime that they're neglecting. And this has nothing to do with actually killing deer. This is just being safe. Check your lifelines, replace your lifelines, replace your straps, replace your tree seats. Do all of that maintenance work on your tree stands now. Do not wait and do it in the fall, and do not just neglect
do it on the first hunt.
Well, and don't neglect to do it. Yeah, there's nothing worse than going in on your first hunt and you find out that your seat's been chewed off your tree stand by the squirrels, or one of your straps is cut, or it's been chewed through. Like, do that work now before the season comes. Believe me, guys, you will thank me. You will come back to this video in October and be like, thank you, Justin, for telling me to go do all my tree stand maintenance now.
I do know a long time ago we put together a bow hunter's checklist. I mean, I know we're getting slightly off topic here, but I mean, I know on the website we've got a killer checklist so you can start going through. I mean, and you know what, it may be a little early out, but I disagree. I mean, I think everyone always waits to go to these pro shops, you know, in July.
Well, no, I agree with you. If you're going to do any bow work,
go now.
Do it now. If you're getting strings,
get your bow. Go.
ABB is kicking out strings like within a couple days right now of ordering them. You've got them, right? If you guys wait until another month or 2 months to be ordering your strings, good luck, guys, because everybody's going to wait. All the pro shops, all the string makers, everybody is going to be slammed. So get that work done now, and it just gives you so much more time to shoot your bow before the season comes, right?
Yeah, and just go through that bow hunter's checklist that we have. And you know, get your clothing out. Make sure you have all the stuff you want. Look at some of the new gear that's out. I mean, these are all little things that you can just be, I don't know, a little bit of a prepper, if you will, and just be completely prepared for when opening day comes. I mean, because before you know it, it's here, and then everyone's rushing around like knuckleheads and saying, hey, what broadhead should I shoot? Are you kidding me? I mean, that decision should have been made already.
You should be shooting broadheads before too long, tuning your bow, getting all that stuff done. So, I mean, I know that sometimes, like, so we want to talk about all these tips and tactics and techniques that we could do to be more successful in the woods this fall, right? From our entrances to our food to our stand locations and all the hunting part of it. But none of that means anything if you can't execute a shot and rely on your equipment when the time comes. You can do all the hunting prep work that you want in the world, but if you make a bad shot or you miss or you screw something up at that moment of opportunity, it was all for nothing. I've never done that. It was, well, I mean, it sucks. Believe me, we've all been there. And then you sit there thinking to yourself, like, gosh dang it, I did all this work. I spent all this time, energy, effort, money, motivation, like everything went into this, and I screwed it up. And could I have done more? Could I have done better? And this is when, like, now is the time when you can do more. You can do better. You can shoot your bow. You can get it tuned. Go to the pro shop. You can shoot with your buddies. You could do local 3D shoots. You can go to an R100 or a total archery challenge. You can get out of your comfort zone when it comes to shooting, because all the hunting stuff is great, but if you can't shoot well and you can't kill that animal when you're given that opportunity, it doesn't mean anything. So do not neglect all the gear. Like I mentioned, strings and cables. Get those replaced. Get your bow tuned. Get your new arrows. Get your broadheads. Get everything and shoot,
really
shoot,
hyped up,
shoot.
man.
I'm going to.
Did you have caffeine during lunch or what?
I'm going to Wyoming in like 60 days, dude. 2 months from today, I will be in Wyoming. And I need to be ready to kill something.
I didn't know about this trip.
Whatever comes in front of me.
That's not legal.
Antelope. 2 months from today.
All right, 2 months from today, Justin is going antelope hunting, and I think finally last year you came out of that little slump you were in from the year before, when everyone else got one and you didn't, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
it was a bad year.
That's what happened.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, it's okay, buddy. I think you shot the blind. You did shoot the blind. It's okay. Justin, it's okay, because you're going to start practicing now, just like what we talked about, right?
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right. We've covered a lot of ground here. We don't want to make this video any longer than we have to. So watch this video, think about what you're doing, and start with the computer. Overlook your piece of property before you dive in. This goes for public too. I mean, if you're hunting a piece of public land where there are no food plots on it, most likely the food plots nearby. So, you can start to cue in on some of those and figure out how you're going to intercept those deer. What else do you want to leave this with right now? What are you doing right now? You've been doing anything? We've been kind of quiet this year a little bit. We've been busy. You got 1 million kids at home. You've been fishing. I saw you caught some fish.
I got 3 kids.
That's a lot of kids.
Playing a lot of sports right now. Kids are in a lot of sports right now, doing a lot of fishing. But I got all my bow's ready to go, man. I've been shooting when I get a little break in the backyard. I'm feeling good right now. I'm feeling good. I did my preseason scouting. I got some tree stand work that I need to get done. And I do need to start at least mowing what are going to become my fall food plots. Unfortunately, we got this dang heat that's come rolling in here, and it's been pretty brutal out there. So I'm trying to wait for a little break in the temperatures to get out and do that work. But it'll get done. I mean, those food plots will get planted in August, mid to late August, hopefully.
And you can have some successful food plots even if you wait till the end of September, and you could even do some late,
Yeah, and I do my stuff's really small. It's all ATV equipment. It's nothing big. But I tell you what, they've been pretty successful. We've harvested a few does out of them, and that's ultimately kind of my goal for this fall is I'd like to get Joey on another deer here this fall. So it's really more for him than for me. I seem to have more luck not in a food plot for me personally. So, but I enjoy doing it. I don't know, there's something about getting out in the woods and just being out there and, I don't know, doing something other than typing in a keyboard all day.
Well, there you have it, guys. This is some stuff that you can start to come up with some ideas and get out there and get in the woods. But I will tell you one thing, you can look at the keyboard or whatever, the monitor all day long, but until you put the actual feet on the ground and get in there and figure out where you're going to be hunting and clear those paths and get ready, you're not going to be successful. You got to get in the woods, you got to scout, you got to put the time in. This is what it comes down to.
It's like anything in life. The harder you work, the sweeter the reward. So good luck to everybody this fall. We will see you soon right here. Bow Hunter Die, baby. Antlers are start growing. Now it's June into July.
Go ahead, you're fine. It's okay.
No,
this happens in life.
I had a thing in my throat.